Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up a little bit later in the show, we'll hear a musical performance from Luc LeBlanc. But first, joining me now is Bob Thornburg from Walhalla, North Dakota, and CEO of SweetPro Feeds, among other things that we're going to talk about today. Bob, thanks for joining us.
Oh, you're sure welcome.
As we start off, we always ask, tell the folks a little bit about yourself and your background, where you're originally from.
Well, originally from Minnesota, and been involved in agricultural things now for a number of years. And all of it kind of has a specific bent that revolves around fermentation, and fermentation of grain in particular. So it's kind of been a circuitous route for me, following a number of different trends, but things that influenced me early on and have had a continuing thread through all of what we're doing. And but the fermenting of grain and the unique characteristics that affords is kind of what's driven an awful lot of what I've been doing and continue to do. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, okay, we're going to get into more things here, but let's just start off with SweetPro Feeds. What is it and how did it get started?
Yeah, SweetPro Feeds is the name that we've given to our use largely of byproducts of ethanol production. And that's what drew me into that whole field, was energy independence back in the early days of that, and diversifying increasingly now toward renewable fuels, that type of thing. Well, in that process, the fermenting of corn in particular, all you're after is the starch. And so the protein, the fat, the fiber, the minerals really are all very, very good in the fat, and they're being concentrated by the removal of the starch, to make the ethanol. But in the early days, that was all viewed almost as a byproduct. How do we get rid of this? We're trying to make alcohol. And I viewed it kind of the other way around. I thought, boy, that's tremendous stuff, and we need to pay more attention to it. And yet it was being viewed, like I say, as almost as an effluent. And increasingly now it's a very valuable co-product. But in the early days, it had no good home. And especially in my situation, I was busy trying to manage an ethanol plant up in Walhalla, and then sell the distiller's grains, and people didn't know what that even was at the time. And then they didn't have feedlots, they didn't have dairies, it was mostly pasture cattle. So they're grazing or, in a dry lot. And so here we had a feed that we were having to sell all the way to Europe, because they knew more about it at the time. Well, ultimately what I did is I developed a way to make that product into a solid lick tub form, so that it could be the vehicle for your vitamin and mineral dispensing, and then pasture cattle could use it. And so that was a good 25 plus years ago that got done. But it was really the first use of distiller's grains in a pasture animal setting. So we built our business on that, and the brand name is called SweetPro Feeds. But that continuing common thread was the fermenting of the grain and consequently the improving of it nutritionally, and then putting it in a form for cattle to use. And basically what's happening there is it's feeding their internal microbial population. So we're feeding the ruminant animal, we're feeding those microbes better, and then they digest their grass better and perform better.
Yeah.
So that was, go ahead.
You mentioned lick tubs, though. I wanted to back up. What's a lick tub?
Well, lick tub is the term we use for it. It's a solid free choice, what it's called, so the animals can go to it at any time, but they're just licking that tub, and then they get a vitamin, mineral, and a protein boost out of that, but then they go to grazing. And the big thing about the way we've done it is when they lick this one, because we're feeding that internal microbial population, they do a better job more efficiently in their grazing, so it's improving their overall efficiency. And that's been a hallmark, and then we've ended up ultimately being pulled into using a lot of what we learned that way into the human diet, as there's more understanding in the human diet of those internal microbes and their value and their importance in the digestive process.
Well, now you've invented a lot of fascinating stuff. How did all this get started?
Well, it got started when way back, and I was living in Minneapolis, and the Arab oil embargoes and things like that of the late 70s, and the long gas lines, and energy independence was really a hallmark. And so we were, in my formative years, we had kind of a missionary zeal about all of that. And so energy independence was kind of the main thrust of things that we were going for. And being in an agricultural setting, ethanol became the hallmark. And so that's how it kind of got started. And I changed industries really to get into this, but I'd been involved in covering, a lot of those developments from a journalist standpoint, and the importance of, the grain trade and utilizing grain more efficiently, and that whole energy independence. So that's what really drove it in the early days, and then just followed a whole new industry in the process.
Well, it did. And what have been the results for owners of livestock and the health of their animals?
Well, the big thing for owners of livestock is that in the past, they've always had an opportunity to supplement their cattle out on pasture, and usually a lot of times they were using molasses. Well, that's largely sugar, and it's a good way to get your vitamins and mineral into them. But instead, we're using something that's a more appropriate carrier, so it complements their grazing better. So instead of a sugar that they have to kind of, deal with, that teaspoon of medicine or teaspoon of sugar to get the medicine go down, well, we're taking a teaspoon of medicine to get the medicine to go down, in a way. And so it has stimulated their feed efficiency in a way that, in the early days, I'd go out to Sikeston and places like that, and I'd ask the guys about how that product was working for them. And they said, well, it's working great. I used to put out 10 bales of hay, and now I'm putting out 7. It's that much more feed efficient. And so we didn't even know that in the early days. We were just looking for a vehicle to have a better use for distillers' grains for pasture cattle. And then we found that it's much more efficient. And then over the years, we've found why it's much more efficient. And then ultimately kind of got pulled into the human food side of things.
Well, all right, there you mentioned human a couple of times here. Can you talk about your concerns about the unhealthy human diets, I guess?
Yeah, well, the biggest thing in the human diet, if I were to make a statement that I think could have the most impact, is we need more fiber in our diet. We don't get enough fiber. A lot of the processing is kind of taking it out for various reasons. And it's simple in that regard, but not just fiber, but increasingly what's become known as prebiotic fiber. That's the fiber that the organisms that are already in your digestive tract, the probiotic bacteria that are helping keep you healthy, help your immune system function, if we treat them better, they'll treat us better. And so that was a parallel that we'd sure seen with, feeding that microbial population in first the cattle and then especially in horses. Mm-hmm. People with horses, they pay a little more attention to their horse because it's a pet and a companion. And they just were so enamored of, the hair coat was slicker and better, and the eyes were clearer, the hoof growth was better, and they get more compliments on their horses. Well, they said, boy, what about for us? How about putting some of that for us as a food? And so we told them, no, we don't do that. We're a feed company. And they said, yes, you should do that. And so over time, we ultimately kind of got pulled into it. And I know my kids had to get pulled along in the journey.
Well, yeah. With that, full disclosure here, Ashley, one of your daughters, works here for us at Prairie Public, and she told us that you used your 5 children sort of as human guinea pigs. Is there truth to that?
Well, yes, yes, there is. I knew they needed as good a nutrition as I could provide and everything. Well, sometimes sneaking good nutrition into a child is not easy. Well, and the one thing we found is that they all love fresh baked bread. Well, if we put some of this material and bake it into bread, then they'll eat the bread. And sure enough, that was kind of the early days of sneaking that better nutrition into the kids.
Okay. Well, let's talk about your invention for humans with the prebiotic fibers and things. And I think you brought maybe some examples here.
Yeah, this one is it's called Probiotine, and that's again that corollary of fermenting grains to improve them and take away the starch. Well, what was happening in the ethanol world was mostly just fermenting corn. We took that same, basic concept, but then we took wheat and oats and barley and flax and fermented those. And so we get a broader amino acid profile and we get really better total nutrition that way. And then we were putting this originally into our animal feeds to diversify the nutritional profile. Well, and then as I mentioned, a lot of our horse customers were saying, give us some. So we finally ended up relenting and spearheading getting the Probiotine into a form that, was in as sterile conditions, and we dried it. Otherwise, we were never drying it before. And so by drying it and baking it in breads and learning about it, we were finding people really, really had a good experience with it. And so then we broadened out from there to put it into other products as well. And so that's where this bar comes from. We hadn't really intended to get into the health bar business. We just wanted to demonstrate the use of Probiotine in an end product, either bake into bread or, mix it into a bar formula. Well, to do that, we kind of had to do it ourselves, and so we did. And now that's starting to take off quite well.
Well, with these inventions or with these discoveries or whatever you call them, did it attract attention from food entrepreneurs?
Well, it really has, and a lot of people that are aware of probiotics are increasingly aware of prebiotics, and you'll hear that term, and just in brief form, prebiotic is the food for the probiotic. And so just to back up a little bit, in your intestinal tract, in your microbiome, increasingly that's the term, the probiotics, there's about 1,000 strains, 500 to 1,000 strains. They're still learning about the human microbiome, but in all of those are what your immune function is keyed off of largely and what keeps you healthy. Well, our approach is more to keep those strains of probiotic bacteria in the best shape that we can. And so we're delivering a prebiotic meal to them. And so that's a term we think you'll hear more about. And so we named the bar the Microbiome Bar, which was, when we first came up with that name, people thought we were a little daft. It should be the Handsome Granola Factory or something. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, from an intestinal tract improvement, if you improve your digestive process, you improve your immune function. 70% of your immune function is in your digestive tract. So it gives you the better shot at staying healthy. And like I say, the American diet and the Western diet in general is just short of fiber. So it gives us a good vehicle to get more fiber into that diet. And so we started with just the fermented material first, then put it into a bar that we kind of developed. And in the bar, there's actually 2 bars in the package. And as soon as we got that all done and we went through all of that and we started presenting it in the marketplace, a big player in the marketplace said, well, how about just 1 bar in a package, and let's put it in a pouch instead. So this is just really isn't even on the market yet. It's the developmental side, but we're moving into a test market with a very big player. And if we're successful in that test market, then it opens up to all of their stores across the U.S. So we're moving in a pretty dramatic fashion for us, a little bitty company up in, on the Canadian border in Walhalla, North Dakota, and all of a sudden we're getting attention from some pretty big players.
Well, I was going to ask you how it's taken off, but some of it's in the early stages, at least this side of your product. But what's it like getting into a market like this? I mean,
Well, it's, for one, we had to determine what is the product. There's lots of health bars, and there's lots of granola bars, and there's energy bars, and there's, meal replacement bars and all of that. And they said, boy, what this business doesn't need is another bar. And we said, well, but so how do you enter that kind of marketplace? Well, we ended up determining that we were coming in with a gut health bar. And so it's a brand new category. So that's kind of how we're taking the approach, is establish a whole new category, because we didn't fit really quite anywhere else. And so by establishing a gut health bar category, now we're the only one in that space, kind of. There's a couple others that are starting to surface, and we think that's great. The more that people are aware of, gut health and just improving the digestive process, and an easier way to stay healthy, and let food. Our basic company, the new company name we use for the food is called Food First, and the idea is, let food be your first medicine. Stay healthy by preventing problems, and so that's the theme that we carried all from the feed company right through now into the food company, and the food's pretty new for us, but we're excited about it, and we've taken it a little slow because the regulatory is more significant, as you would imagine, and so we're now at an SQF level 2 certified facility and all those kinds of things. Well, I didn't know what those were when we started, and I was just busy trying to keep those kids alive. And
yeah, well, that sounds like a whole nother conversation to talk about what you had to do to get that. But let's back up a minute, because this isn't all you've ever done. You were actually a TV and radio journalist.
Well, mostly radio.
Okay.
And for good reason. But and WCCO Radio in Minneapolis is kind of where I didn't exactly get my start. I started out at a little station down in Iowa, in Clear Lake, or Mason City, Iowa, coming straight out of college, but then got hired by WCCO Radio. And having grown up in Minneapolis, that was a big deal for me. And but it was interesting, some of the things that I ended up with, because it was in the journalism side, and so for me it was right at the first Russian-American grain sale. So we're down on the Minneapolis Grain Exchange, seeing the dramatic influences that represented, and then the Arab oil embargo and the shift toward ethanol, being interested and stuff like that, and I found that a lot of the things that I was reporting on, I was just really intrigued by as an observer. And I thought, well, what about being a participant? And so I decided to make a career change. But the thing that I found that was really interesting is that in news, there's quite a parallel to marketing, in the sense that in news you're always looking for what's new, what's interesting, what are trends that are taking shape, and you want to position yourself to be on the forefront of reporting on that. Well, on the business side, I found we were kind of positioning ourselves to be on the forefront of some of those new developments too. So the background was surprisingly good, and it's really been interesting.
Well, can you talk some about your research into renewables?
Yeah, the renewables is an area that, because ethanol is a renewable fuel, we look at that cornfield, for example, as a huge solar panel. It's taking that sunshine and photosynthetically converting that power into a nice package of energy. And so we can use it strategically and that type of thing. And so that wasn't necessarily the original orientation of the industry. It was more energy independence, because we were feeling, kind of at the mercy of the Arab Arab oil embargoes and that type of thing in the early days. And so energy independence was what drove it originally. Well, now U.S. is energy independent. I mean, it's been a dramatic shift that way and is a net exporter now. Well, that was quite a shift from the early days. But the interesting thing is one of those components, the ethanol component has surfaced as a stronger component in renewable fuel. And so it provides a nice liquid fuel. With wind energy, you're getting the electricity. With solar, you're getting electricity and heat, depending on how you do it. But that mix of these new renewable energies is just intriguing. And so for me, kind of having watched it evolve over the years and become a significant alternative, I guess, and improving our renewable fuel side of things, it's very exciting for me.
Well, Bob, we're really almost out of time. Are you working on any new products?
Well, one of the things we're working on, in fact, it's one of the flavors of the Health Bar. It's the final flavor we have called the Sunny Saskatoon Bar. And Saskatoon berries are one of the things that we're real intrigued with because they're very nutritional, high antioxidants, and they're grown right in this area, and in Canada in particular. And so we're taking a position of being helpful to help introduce that better into the American marketplace and drying it where we need to and preparing
Bob, I wish we had more time, but we are out. But if people want more information, where can they go?
Well, probiotin.com is the website, and the microbiome bar, that's on Amazon. So if you Google microbiome bar, you can find out about it there too. So.
All right. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is great. Appreciate it.
Stay tuned for more. Born and raised in Minnesota, Luc LeBlanc is a hardworking musician who taught himself how to play guitar at age 11. Since then, he's received awards, opened for several mainstream bands, and released albums with his infectious style of original acoustic music. He has toured the country, but he has a special connection to the energy of Nashville.
People ask why I hurt so bad. I got what I wanted and I lost what I had. Rainy nights make the heartache slow. We were 2 lanes driving on a 1-lane road. I got the same blues I can't shake. I got the same blues, it's my mistake. I'm walking in the same shoes, hoping they don't break. I got the same blues I can't shake. I could run fast and far away, fool myself into working all day. But the fever in my bones, it won't die young. My gear's jammed and my body's numb. I got the same blues I can't shake. I got the same blues, it's my mistake. I'm walking in the same shoes, hoping they don't break. I got the same blues I can't shake. Driving at midnight gets me lonesome. I didn't know love until I had some. She didn't like my occupation. It was a drive-away situation. I got the same blues I can't shake. I got the same blues, it's my mistake. I'm walking in the same shoes, hoping that I won't break. I got the same blues I can't shake.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4, 2008. And by the members of Prairie Public.